Alright everyone, Sweden has dropped rape charges against Julian Assange. Now the importance of this can't be overstated, but not for the reasons some people are suspecting. Some people are saying, oh well, if Sweden has dropped its case, maybe the UK and US will follow suit. People are realizing back up off Julian Assange and he goes free and, you know, he can actually leave the building he's been in for years at a time like a prisoner. That I don't think is going to happen. Unfortunately, I hate to say this, only a major political overhaul in a number of different countries would allow Julian Assange to ever leave the Ecuadorian embassy again. He'd probably get killed the second he stepped out of it anyway, because one of these political groups would send hitmen to air him out or something, or they'd wait a week or something like that. So I don't think he'll ever be free. The importance is this, though. You remember during the DNC leaks period and thereafter when WikiLeaks would weigh in on, you know, here's batch number 13 of the Podesta emails. Here's something from the DNC. Here's Hillary Clinton making a Goldman Sachs speech. Every single fucking time that he involved himself with that material, one of the most common lines, when the lamestream media would be forced to report on the new batch and, you know, whatever gems it contained, because there are usually 2 or 3 major points in every batch that were, like, actually newsworthy to their standards. Every single time, what did all the fucking bot accounts and shills and, you know, partisans that wanted Hillary Clinton to win, what did they say about Julian Assange? Oh, he's a rapist. He rapes people constantly, so we can ignore whatever he says. Well, apparently that's not true, because Sweden's dropping the charges now. Because they don't have any evidence, and they never did. That line was always a lie. That was just a character assassination of Assange that they were using to try to discredit the material that he was actually reporting on. Now, Assange himself never leaked anything. He simply publishes material that's being leaked to WikiLeaks. A lot of people don't even know that. They think that WikiLeaks is like some hacker firm on steroids or something, and actually cracks into people's servers, tries to gain access to their emails and, you know, their other accounts and everything else under the sun in order to get a hot scoop or something like that. WikiLeaks has never done so. They wanted to say that WikiLeaks was, oh, they're doing this for Russia. They're controlled by Russia, and yet, you know, years ago, of course, they were dumping material on Russia, specifically on Putin and his sort of inner circle's own corruption, which is there, evidently. It's, you know, pretty obvious. He's former KGB, surrounds himself by sort of this extremely corrupt commie bloc mafioso group. In that sense, though, not really that different from the Democratic Party, for which material exists to suggest they operate in much the same manner. There's actually a significant similarity. I can understand why Hillary Clinton was willing to work with the Russians and sell them a substantial proportion of U.S. uranium with the Uranium One deal that also almost never got reported on, because they're like, oh, it's not newsworthy, it doesn't matter. You know, Hillary Clinton's sales to Russia didn't matter at the time, because they had to go with the narrative of the DNC hack, that was Russia. The Podesta email phishing, which is what it was, that was Russia. WikiLeaks is controlled by Russia. Julian Assange is now working for Russia. You know, I don't know what he's going to spend the money on, since he can't leave the fucking embassy. But somehow they paid him off anyway. And so he's controlled by Russia, and he's a rapist. You know, and apparently there was something with a shell website they set up, and they were trying to entrap him somehow so they could label him a kitty fiddler or something like that. And that was probably the DNC trying to do that. Some tangential evidence to suggest that happened. I wouldn't put it past them. The DNC thinks they're hot shit, don't they? Yeah. Julian Assange is not a rapist. And the sex he had with those women in Sweden was consensual. The nation of Sweden now is basically admitting that to be the case. They can't go forward with charges. Think about it. Julian Assange, essentially imprisoned for years, wanted by the UK for one thing and the US by another, despite breaking no actual laws in any nation. Despite the fact that there are international groups that have said technically speaking, this is just a political hit job, and he should technically be free. In fact, he might be owed reparations from some of these states because they've been having him hold up here so long. He was never... the charges were never going to stick because there was never any evidence. Now, I find it funny. The same people that want... They want evidence when there's a criminal case. They're like, oh, you must fulfill the burden of proof. The mere claim by the nation of Sweden that Julian Assange did something wrong was enough for them the second he began leaking about the DNC. Now, those charges were pre-existent. They came from before that period of time. But they never talked about it. They never cared about it. And I sure as hell never saw a bunch of partisan Democrats before that period of the election talking about how they hated Julian Assange and he was an abuser of women and all of these things. No, they only started talking about that when they were force-fed that gruel swill of a line by their corporate buddies in the DNC, their political masters, through propaganda, in order to deflect from the DNC leaks. They were terrified because WikiLeaks has a much broader audience than a lot of similar, groups or individuals would have. It's much more well known, going back to the Iraq War. It's got much more clout. It's also probably got a higher budget for operating. And we're in the social media era, which means now it's small-time investment almost to run such a thing. All you need is a Twitter account and some page that can handle text files because of the nature of what they typically are dumping. And it's become easier and easier and easier for them to do actual investigative journalism. And therein lies really the rub for the corporate media. This is why they wanted to take Assange down. They're just sad because they can never, they're so corporate controlled, they can never actually conduct an investigation. You look at the Seth Rich stuff with WAPO right now, as of today, I'll be reporting on that. It's the same story. The old guard yellow journalists, so-called, they're not even yellow journalists, they're just yellow. They don't conduct any investigation, they don't conduct journalism. Small local groups that are affiliates of the larger groups, they'll do some journalism, they'll interview somebody, or they'll report on something happening locally, usually without spin. Then it gets spun into all irrelevance by the old guard media's parent companies. So you have a story, for instance, outbreak of tornadoes in the Midwest. Now, all the local groups, they're reporting on the damage, they're reporting on lives lost, people who have been injured, X number of homes have been destroyed, X number of people are without power. What does the parent company do? They turn it into a story that's 90%, oh, it's climate change. Fuck those little people out there that we pretend to care so much about them with all these little local affiliates. And they'll go out and they'll fluff up the population. Oh, it's such a terrible day for our community. Then we get a hold of the story. All we do is use it for spin. We use it for some political or social reason. It doesn't have anything to do with straight reporting. And that's all you get from the corporate media. I really hope everyone here has cut or is going to cut their cable. Because, if you're watching fucking TV, if you're watching CNN, Fox, whatever it is, that's time you could be watching 99% of all the interesting content being made, which is on the fucking internet, and you can interact with it and make your own content. How much more beneficial can you possibly get? And then you're not just sitting there like a zombie, you actually develop analytical insights into what's going on in the world. Maybe you get ambitious, you want to dig deeper and make some sort of investment into having some sort of audience or something. It's what happened to me. Originally it was just, oh yeah, I'm going to weigh in on this because I find it interesting. Now it's like, oh well, I need to think about ways to potentially broaden even further because I'm hitting some sort of chord here. And many others have experienced the same thing. It's because there's a vacuum left behind by the slow death of like Fox, MSNBC, groups like that, ABC, NBC, whatever they happen to be. Even some of the foreign media, BBC. They did something a while ago. Can't remember exactly what it was. I think it was a poll they conducted. And only some minuscule proportion of the younger people in the UK even pay attention to the BBC. It should be 0%. If you trust them, you've got problems too. It's as plain as I see the camera in front of me that they're biased. See, it's even more clear than like CNN. They're the worst. I used to have a little bit more respect for the BBC. I think some of that sort of nostalgia, oh, it's like the British Broadcasting Company. Yes, it's straight reporting on the other side of the pond. It's like now it's just, you know, a bunch of fruitcakes that are up there to constantly spin everything. It's crazy. But yeah, Julian Assange is not a rapist. But then again, people were telling you that during the election. People were marking on that. And a lot of these partisans didn't want to believe it. So they didn't believe the leaks, and that was the whole point. That's why they let people make such comments without actual evidence. Nobody cares about justice for those that have inserted themselves into political situations and then been blamed for a crime. People on the other so-called side will never call for justice. They'll never say, oh, well, let's wait for the investigation to culminate. Let's wait for actual evidence rather than just a fucking claim by a state, by a prosecuting body. And they don't care about that. They want instant guilt and instant execution for the most part because they're pro-censorship authoritarians, just sort of the way that people work when their party is struggling for power. Even if their party's worthless, and the Democratic Party is worthless, they still don't have a platform. They keep talking about one last gem I've got to talk about here. Week goes by since the last time I mentioned this. Supposedly Trump is in the worst week of his presidency. Oh, it's even worse than like the first few weeks. He's just so garbled, so incoherent, such a horrible human being, and selling stuff to the Saudis and bowing before the Saudi king, and he's just falling apart. Everyone has abandoned him. He'll be impeached and removed. And yet they still haven't formed a platform. Well, yeah, okay, go ahead and impeach and remove Trump. You know, over the next few years leading up to the 2020 election, you're still going to have to form a platform. Even if he got totally ass-blasted, even if he got thrown in jail, removed from office, and then hurled into a cell, it still wouldn't let you win the next election unless you actually have something to run on. Saying, oh, we removed Trump, he is not a platform, any more than, oh, we're the anti-Trump party. Should he still be there, and I think he will. I think it's going to be harder to overcome him than you think. You're underestimating his capabilities. But then again, he did that during the election. That's why you lost. That's about all. Peace out.